Hi, I'm Claudia Zelazny, Director of Lifestyle Programming at Legacy Performance Center in Dallas. And I'm talking with Brandon Pollard, who is one of the founders of the Texas Honeybee Guild. He presented information tonight for a group of our clients about being the bridge for truth in agriculture. Over the past several years, we've heard so much information about bees disappearing, hives being eradicated, the death of bees. Why do you think this is happening?
Well, I wish I had a really short answer, but it's nearly thousandfold, and it's unfortunately a situation where the more you find out, the more problems you realize spawn from your investigation. Especially with some of our bee researchers, that's one of the challenges is that when you're actually, if you're a scientist and you are put in the place of doing bee research and trying to figure out what it is exactly that's contributing to this decline of honeybees, you have to pick a certain amount of things that you can measure and quantify. And first of all, you're dealing with a flying insect, that can fly 3 to 5 miles away. So you have to have an area, in a 3 to 5 mile radius that you can, somewhat control. Which is, in the scientific world is extremely difficult. And at the same time, you don't have control over where they're going. So being that the case, in the case of certain chemicals that are accumulating inside of the beehives, certainly this is one of the main issues that we're having is that, these may be sublethal doses of chemicals for humans, but for honeybees, very much like the canary in the coal mine, these chemicals that are being introduced, whether it's being introduced by a beekeeper, which is part of the problem, but is also being brought in by the bees, whether it's through pollen or nectar or water, it's actually being introduced into the beehive, and all those things are being stored in the wax, in the honeycomb. And the honeycomb is porous, and unfortunately over a period of time, all these things will accumulate. And part of the challenge to some of the scientists is, well, gosh, we have 90 plus chemicals that we're legally able to put on our crops that could possibly be introduced into a beehive. The bees have viruses, they have bacteria, they have fungi. All these things are in a very concentrated space, and there's lots of interactions happening simultaneously. And because of all these things being introduced in the way of chemicals, and with the fungi, the bacteria, and the viruses, we don't exactly know how these are interacting with one another. For sure, some of the cases where they've taken a certain virus and then they've taken a certain chemical and they've gotten it down to just these two particular things in one very particular moment. We found that the mortality rate in the bees with this particular parasitic mite and this particular chemical is thousandfold. And the daunting task, for beekeepers and for scientists that are doing the research is that, you maybe have a victory story and that you have this, we know that this chemical and this virus interact and they cause death and mortality in bees. Well, like I said, with 90 plus chemicals and, not knowing how each and every one of these chemicals interact amongst one another, but also with actually the fungi and the bacteria and the viruses that the bees actually carry within their body, and how they're also reacting to those particular chemicals. So just that one thing, which is, it's kind of a Pandora's box. Like I said, you get into it, and the more you realize there's many more problems that we have. Certainly lack of forage, because we have just with industry, with neighborhoods, the things get landscaped, clear cut, and then things aren't reintroduced back into that environment where you have nectar and pollen being produced, where it used to be produced before. So we certainly need to address the issue of planting more things for the native pollinators, because it's not just the bees that are disappearing, but it's also all these other native pollinator species that were actually here in America before the bees even got here. But this is a global problem. It's not just specific to America. All beekeepers are losing their bees. So to that point, for instance, France and Germany banned a certain chemical. Well, we knew, and it's come about in this country with the FDA, knew that this chemical was deleterious to the honeybees. Well, we still passed it and said it's okay. We can still spray it on our crops. well, France and Germany banned that chemical. Well, they're still losing bees in France and Germany. So it's not just the chemical issue. There's other environmental issues that are contributing to the problem. And so, as I said, since the latter part of 2006, we've been just night and day trying to figure out exactly what this is. But like I said before, the more we get into it, the more we realize it's a larger problem than we know how to deal with it.
So what keeps your passion?
Well, when you just look and you see that little bee just completely covered with each and every hair with just thousands of little granules of pollen, it's just, to me, just so amazing that regardless of what is manifesting itself in the bee's environment, they just continue to just go about their business and just work and work. And for me, to think just the power of that little bee, that it contributes $20 billion to our agriculture, that it contributes 1 in every 3 bites of food that we eat. We're still losing a third of our bees every year. But when you put your head inside that beehive and when you see that little bee on that flower, to me it's just the most powerful and an inspiring thing that you can witness.
So how many bees does it take to make a jar of honey like this?
Well, this is a 12-ounce jar. And I'm not sure how many teaspoons are in it, but if you count how many teaspoons are in this jar, it takes the life of 12 bees just to fill 1 teaspoon. So whatever receptacle that you're considering, it takes a bee. It takes just 1 bee. In its 40 days of average living, it's only going to make 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey. So to me, it's just fascinating and phenomenal that we can. This particular jar, for instance, which is 32 ounces, that how many bees and how much work it actually took those bees to produce that substance. I mean, to us, it is liquid gold.
It's pretty amazing, isn't it?
It's beautiful.
Go.
So apart from getting involved with the local economy with your farmers markets and perhaps getting involved with bees through your local bee clubs. You can also go to several places on the web where you can find out a little bit more information. There's a presentation that the Texas Honeybee Guild offers. It's called Being the Bridge to Truth for Agriculture, that will enlighten you a little bit more with the challenges facing the beekeeping industry and perhaps some of the things that you might be able to do in your own towns or neighborhoods that can help with the honeybees. There's several documentaries that you can also see that are available. Queen of the Sun, which is a fairly recent documentary from some documentary makers out in Portland, Oregon, that we have most recently been helping promote at a theater here in town. You can actually go to queenofthesun.com and you will be able to, they'll kind of walk you through the steps if you're interested in actually showing the film in your area. Vanishing of the Bees is another very powerful and important documentary that you can also see. Some of the things that I would encourage you to go through some of the PBS websites. There's ANOVA programs on PBS that you can go to, The Silence of the Bees. There's Tales from the Hive is another very good documentary that you can see. Another one also is that actually was up for Best Documentary in 2009 is Food Inc., which doesn't wholeheartedly address some of the things that's happening with the bees, but does touch on it just a little bit. But just does kind of bring you up to speed just on some of the challenges that we face with industrial agriculture and monoculture and what we need to do to shift everything back into a more community-based food production system.